keep on moving. Again, we're going to encourage you if you need to take breaks as needed and come back with us. But we're going to move on to our final, last but not least, panel for today. And this one is going to be highlights from a 2025 research literature review project, studies related to HIV and employment. And this is going to be moderated by Martha Cameron, who we've heard from earlier on this morning, who again is a research specialist at Georgetown University and a director for the International Community of Women Living with HIV North America, and a commissioner in Washington, D.C. for the Regional Planning Commission on Health and HIV. So we're going to quickly spotlight all of our panelists and then pass it over to Martha for our final panel of the day.
Yes, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, it has been an amazing, amazing day. Those were really, really like two amazing panels. I'm so privileged to have seen the dandelions. I think that was really amazing information that they gave us, including really giving us the torch or asking us to pass on the torch to a new generation. And then, of course, the amazing panel with Miss Danielle. I think that was just really informative, especially for the people who are going to be doing, counseling and vocational rehabilitation, to just hear about the different perspectives. Thank you so much. So we're going to move into this panel that I'm really privileged to moderate, and that is highlights from the research literature review that has actually been commissioned by the National Working Positive Coalition. And the simple reason for this has been that there is such a dearth of literature. There's very little out there that specifically zeroes in on people living with HIV and employment. It will sometimes mention it as a barrier, as we will hear, but very little that has it related to quality of life. I have been so privileged. I joined the research working group for the National Working Positive Coalition when I was working with Mark, and I have been allowed and really privileged to stay on. You're going to hear from the amazing folks listed on the screen, Jen and Liza, who are actually the co-chairs of the research working group for the National Working Coalition. And then Atia, who is actually from Canada, Pabord, who recently joined us here in the US, and Sangwon, who is our powerful moderator, if I can say, for the literature review project that we have. So I won't go into, I think some of our bios are going to be shared via the slides. We don't have too much time, so we'll keep it moving so that we can maximize our time. Next slide, please. And we can move on ready to the next slide. I kind of shared. So I think we've already said this. We'll run through all the panelists. I will be watching chat. And so please feel free to add a question so that you don't forget it. And then, of course, we'll be sharing the slides and links after as well. So please move on to the next slide. So just a little bit about the research working group. I mean, it was established in 2003. That's interesting because that's when I was diagnosed in 2003. So it's been there over 20 years. And I think you hear a little bit more from Liza, who was a founding member and has been with NWPC since inception. And really the goals for this are to advance research on HIV, vocational development and employment. We support interdisciplinary collaboration. So you find people that end up being a part of this or end up being invited, coming from all kinds of different disciplines. And of course, the idea is to specifically inform HIV and care and prevention policy development. Last year, when we had an Office of National AIDS Policy, we were really privileged to have, people that headed the national ONAP to come and visit with us. We have had people from the CDC come visit with us, and all this so that we can actually inform some of the policy related to HIV care and prevention as it relates to employment. Next slide. So I thought this would actually be better for us to hear more sort of at the end in terms of our activities. But I know this is something, maybe you want me to pass this on to Jen or Liza to share a little bit more about this?
Okay, sure. So yeah, we don't want to take too much time, but our research working group have been working monthly together to collaborate with researchers across the country and internationally. So we often present together at this type of conferences, trainings, but we also do some research project. For example, recently, Mark and Liza presented at the White House Office of National AIDS Policy convening. It's called Enhancing the Lives of People Living with HIV. Currently, we're doing this lead review project, and we also collaborate with CDC Medical Monitoring Project. The next slide also shows some of our past completed project. If you can go on to the next slide. So I won't go in details, but I'm sure we're gonna send out our slides to everyone, and there is a link within each project. So if you're interested, you can take a look at our past project and connect with us if you have any interest in collaborating with our research team. Thank you. I think we can move on. Yes. Martha, you are on mute.
You'd think we would have learned this by now. Thank you. So we are going to be talking about HIV and employment models. And this is really just a brief overview of kind of what you will hear. But I think the idea is to think about this in the context of how HIV service care and delivery is provided. I think you've heard a lot from the dandelions and from the previous panels about what it really takes for different people who are living with HIV to just overcome some of the stigma and discrimination that is related to their lives, overcome the challenges related to their health, and then eventually consider working and the different counseling, mentorship, and sometimes, quite frankly, just angels we have in our lives that end up, linking us to employment or things that can help us be employed. And really, I think the foundation of this is to see employment as a key to the quality of life of people living with HIV, right? That a lot of us that are living with HIV are living in poverty and under the poverty line. I think you heard from the Reverend how he went through these stages to where he wanted a job. And when he wasn't working, his job was to be looking for a job because he had realized that in order to have quality housing, quality food, he needed to be employed and needed to have quality employment so that he just wasn't living in areas, that were rat infested, as he shared. Why are the models needed? Well, they really help us explain these complex structures. I mean, you just heard about how complex the reality of the lives of people living with HIV are. And yet, because they're done in various contexts, those models are sometimes incomplete or they are limited. And so we'll hear from the panelists today. We will review the benefits and limitations of key models, and we will look at how research can highlight the directions, not just for future research, but also for policy and then practice and implementation, right? One of the things that motivated us to do this was the fact that, a few years ago, employment was actually, quality of life indicators were actually placed into the National HIV/AIDS strategy and employment was one of those things. And yet we can see that there's been a struggle of how does that get implemented? How does that get funded, supported? How does this get communicated to our community? So without much ado, I will pass it on to our first panelist for board, I think, who's going to talk about one of the first models.
Yes, thank you very much, Martha, and thank you for having me. It's an honor to share this platform with my esteemed colleague and the amazing panel. So can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. So I'm going to talk about the client-focused considering work model that was by Betty Kohlenberg and Peter Goldblum, were the first to propose a framework for addressing the employment needs for PL-HIV, people living with HIV, in 2005. The client-focused considering work model presents key guiding principles that are critical to incorporate into HIV services and policy. As noted in the name, it's a client-focused approach, and self-determination is a critical component of the model, which means individuals do have a choice in the decision-making process. It also incorporates change theory, which is applied to phases of the considering work process. This model proposes that the need to consider changes in employment status comes from pressure in 4 key domains, which will be discussed in the next slide. And understanding the different stages of considering work can inform what interventions are essentially needed. And it's important to note that people can reconsider the decisions at any point in the process. So now we're going to have an overview of the model. Martha, thank you very much. So this is the considering work model that is designed to help people living with HIV make informed decisions about employment. The need for vocational decision-making comes about when there is a pressure for life change in these 4 domains of influence that you can see on the left, the colorful circles: medical and psychosocial, that can be emotional well-being, financial and legal, and vocational factors, that is like something like career aspirations. This model emphasizes on a client-centered approach that recognizes that employment decisions are dynamic and influenced by changing life circumstances, as they do. There are 4 phases of considerations, as you can see. The first starting with contemplation, and that's where clients assess the feasibility of the decisions to change and essentially weigh the pros and cons. Then comes preparation, which is when individuals assess decisions and make plans for the decisions that they want to consider. The next is action. Now, how to achieve these set goals that they have considered. And finally, resolution, to either adapt to or to accept the decisions or the status that they take on. The outcomes can include choice to work, not to work, or to consider any viable options that they have. We should also bear in mind that this model's flexibility allows for reconsiderations of decisions over time, and one can move back and forth through these phases, any of these phases. And also it's important to note that people can consider their decisions at any point of the process. Additionally, it recognizes that changes in life circumstances can impact decision-making, and access to information is critical in decision-making process, as it poses a unique focus on the need to have access to vocational information as a key factor for quality of life. So Martha, can we go to next slide, please? Thank you very much. Now we go through some of the benefits and limitations. So as you see, it is an individualized and dynamic process. As it emphasized earlier, it is a client-centered approach which focuses on individual choices, and it recognizes that these choices can very well change as the mental health and life circumstances alter. Considering work models supports flexible work frameworks and strategies for people living with HIV. And it also focuses on self-determination and informed choices as integral foundation of this model to reduce employment-related stress. However, we will have some limitations to this model. As you see, this model focuses on self-determination, always intended to improve the impact of employment on quality of life. However, quality of life wasn't included as a formal outcome. Also, it does not account for broader cultural and systemic issues and policies. Therefore, there are work to be done and improvements to be incorporated in this model. Thank you.
Perfect. So we'll keep it moving. Thank you for that, Farbod.
Yes, the next one, I'm someone new Lee. I know you can call me someone if you have any question. And the next model is a socio-ecological model. As the farmer mentioned about the considering work model, like and then one of the limitation mentioned there was about like the model itself is actually with the approach individualizing the people living with HIV's experience and journeys and employment and career. And the social ecological model itself is the model coming from a lot of critics on the like traditional developmental psychology discourses. You can think of like, all the conversations around parenting style or like how it affects children's like life or something, but it's limiting to the individual perspective anyway. So the model coming from that, critics, and it has been used as a framework that can help to understand the multiple factor impact individual behaviors and outcomes. So originally it was conceptualized and revised by the multiple scholars in different fields. And the students might recognize the Bronfenbrenner, who is the most famous person in this model. And also a lot of other scholars have been engaging in this, like in developing this model. And the particularly for the people living in HIV's employment and the career development, Mosby and colleagues, like in 2020, their team like try to use this model to like understand what kind of factors like determinants are related with the people living HIV's employment experiences. And this is the original like Bronfenbrenner, like most famous model people might see in the textbooks or like in the like other websites or resources. And you can see that at the center of this circle so is starting from the child, like because like this model originally coming from developmental psychology. So child with the people like surrounding the child and the interactions, like the relationship. And then the another system like exosystem, like also affecting the like not directly to the child, but like people around the child is affected by them, and it's indirectly affecting the child's wellness or like mental health or development. So like multiple like circles, like layers and levels, like they try to address in this model. We can go next slide. And then this is the Mosby. Their team try to pull all the determinants and factors from their scoping review, literature review, and try to place that in each circle, each level of the model. So starting from the individual model, like, demographic, health status, employment and education, and like knowledge, education, attitude, belief, and practices at an individual level, and coming from that, like interpersonal level, like social support system, organizational level, work environment, community, and policy goes up to there. So it's showing that the each level, how the factors can interact with the people's experiences in employment and career. We can go to the next slide. Yes. And when you're thinking about that, multiple level coming from the individual, because as a counselor, traditionally we've been focusing on the individual, which means like we are working with the individual. We try to focus on how they're understanding, try to help them in a one-on-one situations. So a lot of conversation and the theories, models in our works, our roles has been highly focusing on our practices in a one-on-one individuals counseling sessions. But it has been also expanding in our field. So now we are seeing the counselor's roles as an advocate, as a part of one of the important role as a change agent. So this is the model by the American Counseling Association called the ACA Advocacy Competencies Domain. And I can give a little bit of explain on that because when the counselors look into the system like social ecological model, they tend to feel lost and know how to deal with all the larger level, like broader level in their practices. We can go to the next slide. So I borrowed the Mosby social ecological model to explain a little bit about how the counselors can play a role in this multiple system. So in the individual level, according to the ACA advocacy competencies. So the upside and the downside is the upside is about when we're working with the actual client in the clinic. And the other side is when we are not working with the actual client, but we can still advocate on behalf of the clients or our future clients. So with the client in the upside, like in the individual level, we can empower them in our practices, like listening, validating, showing the empathy, being present and showing them how we are understanding their situation and helping them to connect with being aware of their understanding their own resources and resources in the community, and then going up to the community level by collaborating with community partners and members, connect them with the existing programs or services, and going up to the collective actions, like if we needed to change more in the institutional level or policy levels. And then on behalf of the clients, we can also do the advocacy from the client's level to the systems, and then also going up to the social political arena. So we can go to the next slide. So the benefit that we can have from the model is about it's giving us some ideas of how helping us to understand how the individual and then environmental factors are interacting in a multiple levels. But the limitation here is going to be it does not specifically focusing on the health or quality of life outcomes. So it might be difficult to see how these can be connected to the certain outcome that we might interested in, let's say employment and career.
Good. Thank you so much, Simon. And Jen, you are doing the Anderson's behavior model.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So next, I'd like to introduce the Anderson's behavioral model of health services use. This model was originally developed in 1960 to understand use of healthcare services, but now it has expanded to a broader range of determinants affecting healthcare access, health behavior, and health outcome. So although employment is not included in all areas, but it has been recognized as one of the factors, Liza and our other working group members have utilized this model to frame research related to use of vocational rehabilitation services and the impact on healthcare services. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is a diagram illustrating the comprehensive and nuanced understanding of how individual and population health behavior and health outcome. So for the contextual and individual characteristic, they all have three factors: predisposing factor, enabling factors, and need factor. So predisposing factor meaning demographics, social structures, health belief. Enabling factor meaning the resources that facilitate or hinder access to healthcare, such as personal resources, family, community resources. Need factor means the actual need or perceived need for health services. Perceive will be like the individual self-assessment, their self-perceived need for healthcare. Evaluating needs will be the healthcare provider's assessment. So I would like to ask you all a question. So if you think about employment, which factor do you think employment will belong to in this diagram? You may type in the chat. Either predisposing, enabling, or need factor. Which one do you think employment will be in this model? Don't be shy. Just type one word in the chat. Need factor. Somebody say need factor. Anybody else? So I'm thinking about, in this model, we are still thinking about health outcome. How employment will play a role in their health, right? Okay, many people say, oh, okay. Bill, would you click on the icon? Just click one time. Yes. Yes. So when we say employment status, it could be predisposing, like their current status, how this related to their health behavior, right? For example, research have shown that people who have worked full-time, they are more likely to access to healthcare benefits. So they are more likely to utilize health services and have better outcome. However, I agree with you. Well, could be both, could be all, right? Because, for example, employment services, is it available in the community, right? Or is it the person's perceived need for using the services, right? So that's why this model can also be used to understand employment outcomes and use of employment services. Would you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, and don't click yet. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, stay here, stay here. All right. So now we're using this model to understand people with HIV's use of employment services and employment outcome. So another quiz, everyone. I know you're all tired, but as a teacher, I like to quiz my students. So quiz again. For contextual characteristic, predisposing factor. What kind of factor could be included in predisposing factor within contextual? I'll give you the example. Bill, would you click once? HIV stigma. So an example would be HIV stigma could be a predisposing factor within a contextual domain, because in different culture, in different society, HIV stigma can be perceived differently, right? So it's one of the predisposing factor. Any other thoughts? Race, violence, that's right. So racial discriminations, violence, inequity, these are all predisposing factor. Disability, yes, that's right. Enabling factor. Can you click once, Bill? Yes. So enabling factor within the contextual characteristic include employment services and employment policy. So for example, are the employment services HIV friendly? Are they tailored to unique needs for people with HIV? The previous panel did a great job talking about some unique needs for people with HIV, right? However, a lot of services, a lot of programs may not be able to address these unique needs, right? So there's a research show that people with HIV are more likely to engage in employment services if they believe the service will tailor to their need and will lead to stable, well-paying jobs. So the available of services is very, really important. The next is need factor. Can you click? Yes. So workplace discrimination, healthcare provider support, also very important. For example, a lot of time the HIV healthcare provider may not be able to discuss their vocational need with their participants, right? Okay. Yeah, I'm running out of time. Can you click on next one? So for individual level, predisposing factor could include work history, employment status, and education. If somebody have a stabilized employment history or an education background, maybe they are more likely to have a better outcome, right? It's just easier to understand. Can you click one time more? Yeah, enabling factor including disability benefits, health benefits, and accommodation. A lot of evidence show that people may be worried about losing their benefits, including health benefits and also other disability-related benefits. So they may choose not to work because of the benefit issues. The next one, yes, need factor, including their personal career goal, motivation, and functional capacity. They may not be having a goal working full time. They may be thinking for my current health status, it's better for me to work part time, you know? So it also depends on personal preferences and motivation. Can you go to the next slide, please? So for this model, it's very practical and can have some policy and intervention recommendation to improve employment services utilization among people with HIV. For example, how to address predisposing factor. A lot of you already mentioned there may be racism, maybe sexism, otherism existing, right? So can we have some specific HIV specific employment services? Can we have culturally competent services and outreach, tailor multilingual needs? Tailor people from minority backgrounds, right? Strengthen enabling services such as providing benefits counseling, integrated support services such as housing, mental health counseling, child care, tailor health services. So a lot of people living in rural area or maybe due to HIV stigma, right? They may not feel comfortable or not accessible to employment services. So telehealth counseling will be important. Lastly, how to respond to need factor, perhaps utilizing motivational interviewing to help people understand their vocational goal, understand their health-related concern, and also address workplace accommodation. The previous panel discussed about disclosure, right? Some people may be afraid of disclosure, but they may not know their legal rights. They may not know how to disclose and how to request reasonable accommodation. Okay, lastly, healthcare provider engagement. Thank you. Should I still have time?
You've run out, but I'll give you 30 seconds to do this slide and then we'll move on to Atia.
Okay, so sorry for overtime, but the benefits for this model, including it recognize the employment in the health outcome. So in the past, a lot of models may not link directly for employment with health, but this model recognizes the importance of employment in health behavior, and it has been expanded to understand vocational outcome and use of vocational services too. So it's a very practical and useful model. However, similar limitation with the previous models, lack of discussion on quality of life outcomes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it for me. We can move on.
Thank you so much. Yep. And we'll move on to Atia. If we can move on to the next slide. Yes, there you go.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Martha. So it's Tia Khan. It's a pleasure to be here, to be presenting, and to be a part of this wonderful team, literature review team, and to be a part of the National Working Positive Coalition. So my model for today is the HRSA model. So the HRSA stands for Health Resources Services Administration, and the HIV/AIDS Bureau HAP Quality of Life Framework. So I'm just going to try to be brief, not take too much of your time. So basically, the HRSA Quality of Life Framework is a model that provides the guidelines to the HIV/AIDS Bureau. The Quality of Life Framework provides the guideline how to provide services to people who are enrolled in the Ryan-wide HIV medical care services in the United States of America. So what do these Ryan-wide services look like? They provide outdoor ambulatory care, primary health care, and the HIV treatment and the supports that people need. So this model is consistent with the revisions or the updates or whatever the evidence is in the research was provided and how those changes have been integrated into the national HIV strategy. So this framework aligns with that, and it focuses on improving not just the medical outcome, but the overall quality of life of people who are living with HIV/AIDS. So we see all the positive sides of this model, but we do see that employment services have not been fully integrated into this framework. So I remember Martha was speaking a while ago about how there was a discussion around employment, but that hasn't really it's been seen through. So on this slide, you can see the HRSA Quality of Life Framework. The figure shows you what the different domains are. So a little bit about the HRSA, what that does, and how these services are catered to people who have HIV/AIDS and who have a low income, who may not be covered by health insurance. So HRSA provides them with these supports and treatments. So they have HRSA. The QUAL have been categorized into these 5 different domains of how services are provided to individuals. So we have the physical, emotional, social, environmental, and structural domain. So if you look at each one of them individually, so what comes within the physical domain? So we have people who can access services where the ART treatment adherence is provided. They can come in to get their dental services. And if they need rehabilitation, they can do that as well, and primary care as well. Under the emotional domain, we see there people can access services if they want to get their depression screened, anxiety screened, or if they have a substance abuse history or they're using substances, that screening can be taken care of as well. And if people need some kind of a psychosocial support, that's there. So trauma-informed services are provided. Looking at the social domain again provides social services. So social services and support are provided through peers. So peer support, peer navigation, so peers can help others navigate through the system. And also a lot of information is provided. Those resources and are provided as well. The environmental domain focuses around trying to prevent homelessness. So people who don't have adequate housing, these services are there to help them find shelters or even some form of more permanent, not permanent, but at least some temporary housing. Transportation to emergency or to a medical appointment is also covered. And if individuals need any financial aid for emergency purposes, this is not like a proper income, but that is also provided. So structural domains is more about processes and policies. So briefly, we can think about if some individuals need any help with the legal system, they don't have access to food, or there's food insecurity problems, they can get access to food banks and even have meals provided to the home. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So when we were doing our literature review study, what did we find? So our literature review was looking at HIV and employment it was a systematic review, and we all had our portions that we were working on, and even looking at each other's portions as well. What we found so far is that there was not a single study that was looking or using the HRSA model. And now when I went out there were several studies that were looking at the HRSA model, but for other purposes, like for primary care, but not specifically looking at HIV and employment. But then we looked closer. We wanted to find out what the truth was. We did find that several of the articles did have variables that we could try to kind of put them into these little boxes, like physical domain, emotional domain, social domain, etc. We could do that. And here we can see some of them, and I can just pick one or two. For example, We have the neurocognitive evaluation screening. So I could kind of fit that into anxiety screening and depression screening. And again, there's stigma, self-esteem, and discrimination. I had several people speaking about stigma. I remember that. And I think in general, speaking about stigma. Social support, we have housing, residential stability, vacant housing, homelessness, the same issues, and food security as well. So we'll move on to the next slide. So I'll just wrap it up. This is my last slide. So what are the benefits? Where are the benefits within this model? So we do see that this model does talk about or it tries to establish an expectation to include the quality of life measures. So a little bit what the quality of life measures are about. So according to the Healthy People 2030 definition, a multidimensional self-determined construct that include but is not limited to physical, mental, emotional, and social health and well-being of an individual. So the HRSA quality of life outcomes take this definition into the building block. But the downside of this model is that it doesn't fully integrate the importance of employment services within the framework. That is a significant gap. Thank you so much.
That was great, Atia. And so I'm not sure if Liza has joined us. I know she was having some issues.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm
Oh,
on my phone
awesome.
and on my computer just to make sure. But the
Okay.
next person is Deshna, and then I'll wrap up.
All right.
Hello everyone, I'm Deshna and I'm really happy to be here. I'll be talking about the Illinois Work and Wellbeing Model, which provides a framework to link employment with overall well-being, particularly for people with disabilities and chronic health conditions. While the model has not been applied to people living with HIV, it has informed research on conditions such as MS and stroke. Like the considering work model, it takes a person-centered approach, acknowledging that employment is deeply interrelated with psychosocial and medical outcomes, something that a lot of panelists before us highlighted. It also integrates the International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health Framework, the ICF framework, viewing disability as a dynamic interaction between health conditions and contextual factors, which really broadens our understanding of disability and rehabilitation. So as you can see, the model consists of three important domains. The first one is the contextual domain, which includes personal characteristics such as personality, interests, values, identity, and environmental factors such as discrimination, cultural attitudes, access to services, and even technology and transportation. Next slide, please. The one before this. Thank you. The career domain focuses on developing vocational identity and skills across different stages. So starting from building career awareness and job seeking skills to maintaining steady employment. And the third domain, the participation domain, extends beyond employment and covers independent living, social integration, and community life, all elements that contribute to an individual's overall well-being and quality of life. Now, the benefits of this model are that it highlights the importance of work to well-being and underscores the need for integrated services that enhance community inclusion. However, like I mentioned before, it has not yet been applied to people living with HIV, and it also does not place a primary focus on vocational decision making and stages of change in the vocational process. So, in other words, this means that it lacks a structured focus on guiding individuals through career related changes and choices, which is really important for tailoring interventions for people living with HIV. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody on the panel, and Martha as our fierce leader, and to all today who came today. I'm really excited to be here. I co-chair the research working group with Jen. So I'm just going to summarize and give you some thoughts about share our thoughts that after going through the synthesis of the literature, how we're thinking we can draw upon the various models to propose a new considering work and quality of life model. So this is missing the client focused, which would be part of the model's name. And mostly we wanted to address the inclusion of looking at not just the impact of employment services on employment outcomes, but also including health outcomes and quality of life outcomes, as well as having a broader socio-ecological framework. So next slide, please. So I'm just going to give a kind of a brief overview of the direction we're going in, just to stimulate some further discussion. So one key factor is that we wanted to include a focus on decision making, because we know that people with HIV are not given enough opportunities and access to information to even think about or engage in the decision making process. So we begin with that pressure to change, and we have the same kind of domains. What we're working on moving forward is helping to the original model just has these broad domains, but as you saw in the Anderson model and other models, they characterize things as with their role. Are they predisposing? Are they enabling? So we're working on pulling that out to give more definition to the model. And you see here, in contrast to the original model, we have a whole section on the socio-ecological factors. And that's important because especially when we consider the many different populations impacted by HIV, we know that interpersonal, organizational, and especially community and policy has significantly different impacts depending upon the group that's impacted. So we can see this model also then being clarified further to address unique needs of women, unique needs of transgender individuals. So there's more that can be developed along those lines. We can retain the phases of considering our work, I think, related to what many of the panelists are saying. You know, you can't just push people in or give them a one choice, or you do these series and you'll get from A to B. And one thing that's kind of missing from this, we see a few arrows, but it's very much back and forth that, you know, somebody can be in the contemplation stage, decide to get preparation. When they go through some job training, they may think, oh, I really need to reconsider this. So this model retains all of that. Then we see there's a range of vocational services that would address a range of needs depending upon what phase of considering work you may be in. And then really critical, I would say, are the last two columns. One is that the employment resolution just isn't, do you have a job or not? We make a distinction between secure and insecure employment. And that's huge, as many of the panelists talked about today, that some jobs will not actually lead to positive health outcomes. So we really need to consider the quality of work. And that highlights also that this model can also be applied. We're kind of talking about it as, you know, not working to working, but it also can be applied to people who are working and want to reconsider. And I think I forget the name of the person. I think it was, well, anyway, I won't waste time on that, who was talking about how she went through a series of jobs. And now she wants to, you know, she likes her job, but she still has a broader dream of getting more involved in the music industry. So that could be considered, well, you know, it's not permanent for her where she's at. So maybe she's going to want to reconsider from a point of employment and go through a similar process to look at how can I get a job that would further enhance my quality of life. And so really most importantly is this final column that really talks about the inclusion of quality of life as an outcome. So if we're thinking of vocational services, we're not just thinking, did you get a job, but we're looking at the impact of that job on your health outcomes, your health, perceived health, and other quality of life factors. And just to conclude, the idea is also in the title that historically we just haven't even as especially within the policy world significantly considered both work, and we haven't considered quality of life. So it's also a request. So the full title is the Client Focused Considering Work and Quality of Life Model to emphasize the self-determination. But we're also asking, and we want to propose this model to give policy and government officials a chance to see how employment, to connect the dots of how employment can be connected to quality of life, health, and HIV prevention. So I'll end on that note and welcome any questions for the panel as
Yeah.
time permits.
Yes, we do have a few minutes, Liza. Thank you so much for bringing it all together. And really, thank you for leading us in this work. I think that is going to have very important policy implications because they've been talking about employment for a long time, but just, you know, I'm not sure there's a real understanding of a model within which they can work to help us in response to everything that we heard today. There's an immediate question in the chat that I think would be really important to consider, just based on even the environment that we're in. And of course, I'll continue to look out for more questions. But there's a question about how any of these models, and I know you mentioned trans folks, but any of these models specifically helping trans and gender diverse folks living with HIV, and especially if they live with disabilities, who may be discriminated against because of their gender identities, especially when you think about the context that we're in, where there's been executive orders that have really targeted the trans and gender diverse communities. Does anybody want to respond to that?
I can give an initial response and I'm happy for others to chime in, but I think that first of all, I just want to acknowledge how painful and horrific and horrified I am about all of these attacks. And I do think that underscores why we want to pull in the socioecological framework and why I think like having a broad model can be a helpful, you know, just lay out broadly some of the connections between health. But I would see a follow-up to these being like taking this framework and then making it much more specific to trans individuals. And really then, you know, now we just talk about these broad domains, psychosocial stigma, that kind of thing. But if we were to make it, if the next step to make it more specific to trans individuals would be labeling the very specific policies, the very specific challenges and types of stigma and make it much more focused on those unique needs.
Right.
And also we welcome folks who want to join the research working group or who'd like to work on in that direction. So I'll just put that invitation out there as well.
Yeah. Board, I know you have worked even in a different country and setting. Do you have any lessons that you might share related to that?
Well, thank you, Martha. So yes, I have worked for over 15 years in Southeast Asia and Malaysia, in particular with marginalized community when it comes to HIV and AIDS. So marginalized communities in different parts of the world can be described differently. However, you can see that consistently that LGBT communities and are usually under attack and targeted by the conservative authorities in different systems. And unfortunately, I share the sentiment with Liza that this is a horrifying time, and it requires people to come together and advocate. And I would like to emphasize on the power of allies. It's not only the community that is directly affected by the issue, it requires the whole society together to come and hold hands and support each other and advocate for the rights and redeem ourselves as valuable members of society, because we're all valued and we're all equal, regardless of all differences in any status that it might be. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well said, well said. Jen and Sangwan and Ati, I know you all have done previous research in different areas. Please feel free to contribute to that.
Yeah, so I agree with Farbod and Liza, and that's really true that we all need to come together as a force. And I did hear from some of the earlier people who were presenting before us. They were talking about advocacy, being an advocate, speaking out, trying to form these allyship, trying to form these groups and speak up. So even in other countries, I know even if there are certain laws that exist, but people are eligible for all these services, regardless of who they are or whatever they identify with. And I think this is what it should be. We should go forward from there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Deshna, Sangwan, Jen, last few minutes, I just wanted to give you each just at least a final contributing word.
Sure, thanks, Martha, and everyone. So earlier in my part, I mentioned about HIV-specific employment services. Another thing is we also involve in peer-led employment services. So we have seen the effectiveness of peer workers. So the earlier question about transgender individuals or other minority individual, I was thinking if they seen their role models in a community, and if they were served by their peer providers, they will be empowered. They will see there's great resources, great role models out there, and they may be inspired, be encouraged to join the workforce. So just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Sangwan?
I do have, can you guys hear me?
Oh, yes.
I do. My question is, part of being an American and then seeing these other countries, how they deal with this, and I'm listening to like Forbo being down in Asia and different places. It really comes to mind that you would think that we are like a melting pot, but I see that there are different groups in different countries that have uphill climb to gain access and be able to be successful in in their goals and everything. So this is very interesting to listen to you guys. And I've been like advocating for people for quite a long time. And I mean, I'm a counselor here for the state, but we get all types of cases, and it really is counseling work because everybody's individual. They have their individual challenges, and it's really interesting to hear different takes from different parts of the world that really is a worldview that we all kind of share. So I'm very happy to really hear that and see where you guys are coming from. And I mean the diversity and that we all going for this same goal of looking out for each other and helping each other and finding true happiness and giving the people that you care about something to look forward to and those types of things. And this is really interesting. This is more than I thought that I'd see today, and I'm very happy to have been a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I love the idea that you bring out how, different diverse, folks are impacted in different ways. And we could talk all day, including about how the fact that the faith community, which is, primarily had responded in sub-Saharan Africa, have also been impacted, right? The effects of what is going on has been indiscriminate, so to speak. And so when Fabod talks about allyship, in this country, some of the trauma that we have received as people living with HIV, and I think the pastor was talking about it, has been religious trauma. And some of the hate that we're seeing is really rooted in has ideological roots that I think are even misrepresentative of the faiths that they say that they represent, right? Hate just cannot be aligned with any kind of faith that usually promotes love and compassion and acceptance. It's really, counter anything that we've heard. And so I think it's really important in the moment that we're in to recognize and really be awake to these things, because I think that is what will promote allyship. That's we're all in this together, and we really need to stand together to fight against what is happening. That I personally, who is from Africa, and like Fabod is saying, we've only seen this in other countries. This kind of authoritarian and almost. Well, let me stop there. But yes, we stand together, we respond together, and the counselors and vocational rehabilitation people that are on this call are really critical to this.
Yeah. And I just hope that this is, I hope this is one of those things where when something seems like it's bad that's happening, really avails an opportunity for us to really go forward and make some positive changes that are more concrete on the long term. I just hope that we all have that type of faith and a way for us to really prevail and get this right. Because, as human beings, we really need to get this right.
Yes. No, thank you very much. There's always opportunity since some around. Dashna, I wanted to give you a few seconds to put in your 2 last cents, and then we can close out our panel.
I'm just listening to everyone speak, and all of the models that we presented today, they just provide a starting point for understanding the complexities of employment and well-being. But real change only comes from advocacy, like so many people said, and education and systemic reform. And it also requires amplifying the voices of minoritized groups. So, which is why I am extremely grateful for this space and for everyone who spoke today.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. Thank you so much. And Atiam, did you say some final comments?
Yeah, I'm just so happy to be here. So I was here right at the beginning, and I heard from all these earlier presenters from the dandelions, and some of those stories really, really made me emotional. And I mean, when I heard about how people went through and how they progressed through their life, how they didn't give up. So I heard so many stories that people just didn't give up. I mean, they're just so persistent. So being persistent is very important. So we need to persist and continue whatever the situation is, whatever is against us, but we need to continue to advocate, to speak out, to continue to struggle. And something good will come out of it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And so as I'm handing over back to Dr. Regina and Mark, I just want to thank each and every one of you for everything that you've done. And I'm really looking forward to what will come out of our literature review, and that it will really help, hopefully, our administration or our counselors or everybody working to this just make, the lives of people living with HIV better. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Martha, and to the panelists, the researchers, for sharing all of these pertinent models. I feel like I was writing down each and every one because I'm very excited to share it with my class, so that they can be aware. I think that engaging in this level of advocacy through research and findings is very important. And so I thank you all for just taking the opportunity to share this. And I'm really excited to see where it goes. And I even love that you all presented an opportunity for anyone, whether you're in an academic space or not, to join your research team. So thank you for that as well and everything that you've shared. And I wrote down systemic reform, advocacy, support for minoritized groups. Like all of those things are very important in this sense. So thank you all for that and for your time. All right, well, we're wrapping up our afternoon, but before we do, first of all, thank you all so much for being here. I want to emphasize the importance of us receiving your feedback through our evaluation survey. This will only help us to make this even greater time after time, but also just to get an idea of how you reviewed today's information in today's Training Institute. So if you could just take a few moments of your time to fill this out, we would be extremely grateful. You can scan the QR code, or you can also check the evaluation survey link in the chat that Mark posted. Again, we would be so grateful. And if you're someone who is looking for a certificate, either for CRC or NBCC credits for today, then we would need for you all to fill that out as well. So thank you in advance for your feedback there. All right, next slide. If you're looking forward to continuing the conversations or wanting to get more information or continue with the network, these are ways to connect with the National Working Positive Coalition listed either through the website, through social media, or through email. And last but not least, we are in deep appreciation for the extraordinary contributions of the individuals listed on this slide. Thank you, thank you, thank you for making this a phenomenal and successful event, for your support throughout the years for previous training institutes, and just for continuing to do the work and to spread the message. Sincerely, from the bottom of our hearts, especially through both the NWPC and through the NCCU Counselor Education Program, thank you so much for everything you've done to make this event a success. And that is our time today. Thank you all for being here from the beginning to the end, or for those who were able to come in at some point. We hope that you take this information. I hope that it's giving you much insight, not only to lived experiences of people living with HIV, employment needs, mental health support, and also just amplifying, elevating voices for people doing the work and passing the torch and research that's going to come out of this. Thank you all for listening and being here, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. That was
Thank
great.
you. That was awesome.
I closed down my facility.
Nice.
Related resources. Oh, no. So I think for me, I will say that I was blessed. Both my sisters are social workers.